Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. If you're in America, I hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. We all had off here yesterday, commemorating and just cherishing, honoring the memories of all the brave men and women who fell defending our country and keeping us free here in America. But hope everyone had a great weekend with their loved ones. And we are back on the attack now. Look, a busy weekend in the Middle East. Well, that goes without saying, right? But in terms of some new alliances, and I say new because I should say deeper in a sense, alliances between three nations in particular that are shaping up. And three, look, in the Islamic world, three powerhouses: Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan. Now, we talk a lot here about Iran's drive for nuclear weapons. And by the way, I'm a bit concerned about the direction of these nuclear talks between the Trump administration and Iran over the nuclear program based on some reports coming out of the region. We're going to break that down as well. But we talk about preventing basically the radical Islamic bomb, the Iranian regime, an apocalyptic regime driving for nuclear weapons. Well, there is one nation, folks, remember, an Islamic nation that, yes, does possess nuclear weapons, dozens at least, I think as many as 120. That would be Pakistan. And Pakistan's current government is not considered a radical Islamic government, but it has certainly been considered over the years, and with good reason, as a government that, and intelligence services and a military in Pakistan that have been sympathetic, that might be an understatement, to terror groups, including Al-Qaeda, including the Taliban next door in Afghanistan. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility, God forbid, that some kind of jihadi faction, radical faction, could take power someday in Pakistan and take a hold of that country's nuclear weapons. Now, that is a doomsday nightmare scenario again, but I hate to say it, in today's climate especially, expect the unexpected in this upside down world in which we're living, and that is not a stretch to say that that could one day happen. But look, a few weeks ago, Pakistan, India at loggerheads, right? We covered it here on the live stream. Some were concerned. Look, these are two nuclear powers, next door neighbors, two nuclear powers. There have been rumblings and concerns for years, decades really, about a nuclear exchange, God forbid, between India and Pakistan. I say all that to say there is an Islamic bomb. Some people have called Iran getting the bomb the Islamic bomb. Well, newsflash, we have that in Pakistan. Pakistan went nuclear, I believe, in 1998. So when you have a nuclear power like Pakistan now drawing closer to an aspiring nuclear power in the Iranian regime, which is most certainly a radical Islamic regime, then you may have big problems. And a big concern is whether Pakistan would share some of that nuclear know-how with the Ayatollahs in Iran, just as the Ayatollahs, from all accounts, look, if they so choose, can cross the finish line very, very quickly and acquire the bomb. At the same time, we have the Prime Minister of Pakistan who visited Iran over the past few days, Shahbaz Sharif. He was also in Ankara, Turkey, meeting with Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the radical president of Turkey, just yesterday. And we see Turkey, Iran continuing to grow closer. Although Turkey and Iran, look, they're both kind of vying to be the top dog in the region, but they see eye to eye on a bunch as well. And certainly at the top of that list would be a shared hostility for Israel and Pakistan as well in that mix. So Turkey, Pakistan, Iran, talking about an Islamic coalition. And does that have prophetic implications, by the way? You think of Ezekiel 38 and 39. Iran and Turkey are two nations where no one disputes that I've heard that, hey, they'll be in that invasion force that comes against Israel in, quote, the latter days, according to the prophet Ezekiel. A lot of people believe that the stands, Tajikistan, etc., some countries like that, Central Asian nations, which are aligned with Turkey, will also be part. Would that other stand, Pakistan, also be part of that Ezekiel coalition that comes against Israel? We're going to discuss that. I want your thoughts first. We've got a very educated audience here, our watchmen and women on the wall. What do you think of all this? Is this a concerning alliance that's shaping up? Look, we've seen Turkey, Iran, and Russia coming together increasingly over the past several years. And some say Russia's absolutely in that Gog invasion force. Some say, no, Russia's not in it. I tend towards Russia being in that Ezekiel force. Some disagree strongly with me. All good. But is Pakistan? We don't hear that discussed much. Look, Pakistan almost forgotten sometimes in the larger discussion over the Middle East and prophetically. Look, this is the one Islamic nation that has nuclear weapons. Are they not a player in this? Let me know what you think. We've got such an educated audience here. We've got some prophecy buffs, I know, who watch as well. While you're at it, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. And remember our partner for today's live stream. We talk about Israel being under threat, fighting a war on 7 fronts, and obviously threatened by this Islamic bomb that Pakistan has and that Iran, God forbid, wants to have and hopefully never will have. But Israel's up against it right now. Europe right now, folks, look, I mean, Germany now coming out and slamming Israel over Gaza, Spain, Britain, France, Canada as well, another Western nation. So there's this alignment in the West against Israel, which is ironic because the Sunni Arab nations like Saudi Arabia are lining up to align with Israel because they get that Israel is the strong horse against that Iranian axis in the region that threatens all. But we have the physical threats, the Iranian axis. And then we have the diplomatic, quote unquote, threats. You have Europe now threatening sanctions, the UN always threatening, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, more like injustice, all piling on the world's one and only Jewish state. Magen David Adom, because of all these threats, Magen David Adom, it's even more important that you support this incredible organization who we partner with. They are Israel's emergency services system. Every terror attack, every heart attack, every car accident, whenever there's a calamity, God forbid, in the nation of Israel, Magen David Adom first responders are the first on the ground. It's savelivesisrael.com. That's savelivesisrael.com. Magen David Adom dispatches every ambulance in Israel, every single one, and they receive thousands, by the way, of emergency calls every day. They collect, process, and distribute Israel's blood supply, not only for civilians, but for the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. It's a largely volunteer force. Overwhelmingly, 90% of the EMTs, paramedics, and first responders at Magen David Adom are volunteers, folks, risking their lives as volunteers. Look, I'm in Israel frequently. The Magen David Adom ambulances are everywhere. They are Israel's first responders. It's savelivesisrael.com. Over 30 Magen David Adom volunteers have been killed since October 7th. They've lost over 17 ambulances, and yet they are there. And right now they need more ambulances. They need more bandages. They need medical supplies. Again, as Israel fights a war on 7 fronts. savelivesisrael.com. Support the great work of Magen David Adom and really fulfill that biblical mandate to bless and support Israel. It's right there. This is the way to do it. Laid out in Genesis 12:3. Magen David Adom, I can't think of a better way to do it. savelivesisrael.com. Okay, let's get into the travels in recent days of Shahbaz Sharif, Pakistan's prime minister. He was in Ankara, Turkey, just yesterday, Sunday, May 26th, quote, according to the Jerusalem Post, agreeing to deepen cooperation across several key sectors, including energy, transportation, and defense. Now, listen, Turkey already a strong military, the second largest military, as a matter of fact, in NATO, behind only the United States. And now Turkey working more closely with a nuclear armed nation, it raises alarm bells. Erdogan, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the radical Muslim Brotherhood-aligned president of Turkey, said Turkey and Pakistan would, quote, strive to enhance cooperation in every field. And wow, this is going to increase bilateral trade between the two nations to $5 billion. And this is a big one. It's going to increase, quote, the efficiency of the Istanbul, Tehran, Islamabad railway line as a potential corridor linking Asia and the Middle East. And there you have it. When we talk about Ezekiel 38:39, look, if you have from Istanbul on through Tehran and up through Islamabad, up to Islamabad in Pakistan, that encompasses a good chunk of, goes into South Asia, into Central Asia, into the Middle East. I mean, and linking Pakistan, Turkey, and Iran. So we talk about this alliance. They have a close relationship already, but they want to bolster that. So that's one part of it. That railway, that bears watching, I think. But then we also had Sharif in Iran and pledging support. This is a big one, folks. The Prime Minister of Pakistan saying he supports Iran's nuclear program. Now, he added the caveat of, well, I support it for peaceful purposes. But this is not someone who's saying, hey, shut down your nuclear program. And it's interesting. Look, Iran and Pakistan share a border, and they have had some skirmishes, including, I think, in January 2024, as recently as about a year and a half ago. There's some border skirmishes there, some cross-border stuff going on there with some Pakistani groups. Surprise, surprise. So it hasn't always been a rosy relationship, but two things here to keep in mind. Three, we're talking three nations, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan. Number one, they have a shared hostility towards Israel, as I mentioned. All are on the Hamas train and supporting Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza. They're the victims, Israel's the aggressor, that kind of standpoint, that kind of mindset. So that's one. Number two, this is all in their own self-interest. Turkey wants to lead the Islamic world. It wants to be the big dog on the block. So it's going to align itself with a nuclear-armed Islamic nation, and Iran, an aspiring nuclear nation. And guess what? If Iran, God forbid, were to acquire the bomb, guess who would be the first in line to also build nuclear weapons? You guessed it, Turkey. A nuclear Iran would spark, why does it matter not just to Israel, but to the world? A nuclear Iran would spark a nuclear arms race in the most chaotic and volatile region in the world, the Middle East. Could you imagine Turkey, Egypt, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, all vying for the bomb after Iran gets it? That's exactly what would happen. You think the Middle East is a tinderbox right now? You ain't seen nothing yet. So Erdogan wants to flex his muscles and have, look, he's looking for strong partners to rebuild the caliphate that he wishes to lead. And to have look, Turkey doesn't have the bomb, but to have a nuclear armed member of his revived caliphate, that's a big one. So he's got that interest in solidifying ties and strengthening ties with Pakistan. In Iran's self-interest, look, number one, Iran's thinking maybe we get some nuclear know-how from the Pakistanis. But number two, a powerful ally, potentially. A nuclear-armed fellow Islamic nation at a time where Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, over the past few days, has been saying, and in regards to his meeting with the Pakistani prime minister, he's been saying Islamic nations need to unite. The Islamic world, there's that word again, caliphate, that I just mentioned, because you might say, Cala what? A caliphate, which radical Islamists of all stripes want, they want to see it revived, is a union, potentially, of all Islamic nations under one leader called the Caliph. Now, the last caliphate was, the seat of that caliphate was in Turkey, the Turkish-led Ottoman Empire. It disbanded, that last caliphate, in 1924. There have been efforts in the past 100 years or so to rebuild that caliphate. ISIS tried. They built a mini caliphate, a mini Islamic state, covering 58,000 square miles of Syria and Iraq. The Muslim Brotherhood, they've tried, and there have been aspiring caliphs, let's just say that, and Erdogan's at the top of the list, really for years. But now that the Iranian axis has been weakened, Erdogan sees his moment to be the leader once again. And he's had a few moments. Look, during the Arab Spring, which became an Islamist winter, 2011, 2012, 2013, Erdogan thought his Muslim Brotherhood brothers were ascendant. Remember, he leads the Turkish branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Then it all collapsed. Egypt, Tunisia, the list goes on. Then with ISIS, 2014, 15, 16, ISIS was ascendant. They built this mini caliphate, and Erdogan was going to take advantage of that. Let them do the dirty work, the on the ground, the maiming and the killing, and then he can kind of roll in and lead it. Then that disbanded. President Trump kept his word, crushed that ISIS caliphate. Now Erdogan sees a new opening. With Iran's ring of fire collapsing, Erdogan saying, maybe I can be the top dog. And if I'm aligned with a nuclear power like Pakistan, all the better to help build my claim to leadership. Now, that brings up the flip side. If you're Pakistan, why not just lead? Why, if you're Pakistan, you're nuclear armed. Why not become the leader of the Islamic world? Why not vie to do that? They haven't had a leader who's wanted to do that, at least in recent years. But is Sharif, the current prime minister, someone who wants to kind of enhance Pakistan's stature in the Muslim world? Perhaps. Because if they get a regime there in Pakistan that has aspirations, I mean, large aspirations beyond just India and going toe-to-toe with India, but in the Middle East and beyond, and it could be a dangerous thing when someone's armed with dozens and dozens of nuclear weapons. But Pakistan has interest here too, in that they took a pretty bloody nose, by all accounts, in that little dust-up they had with India last month, or earlier this month, I should say. India pretty much took it to them at the end of the day. And Pakistan now, just as Iran has been bruised and battered by Israel, the ring of fire has collapsed, Iran's air defenses are largely collapsed. Look, Pakistan took it on the chin a bit. And for both, by the way, Pakistan and Iran, this is what happens when you sponsor terror. But Iran is looking for some backup because, look, the proxy strategy, Ring of Fire, Hamas and Hezbollah, the Houthis, etc., it only got Iran so far because now they're all being walloped. That Ring of Fire has collapsed. So Iran now sees the limitations, the Iranian regime, of the proxy strategy. Look, it caused a lot of havoc, but now those proxies, they're licking their wounds. They're on the ropes. If you're Iran, isn't it a lot more smarter, and isn't there more staying power to align yourself not just with terror groups, but with nation states and nuclear armed nation states? That's why you see Iran cleaving closer to Russia and China, and yes, now Pakistan. And to Turkey, which is on nuclear power, but which is still a powerhouse and a NATO member. So Iran knows what it's doing. The Iranian regime knows what it's doing. In the case of Pakistan, what does it get out of this alliance? Look, Pakistan also took it on the chin, courtesy of India. And Pakistan's looking for some stronger alliances, perhaps. India is led, it's a Hindu government. So perhaps Pakistan's saying, look, you know, Iran wants to unite the Islamic world against its common foes, Israel at the top of the list. Turkey wants to do the same. And perhaps Pakistan is going to become a little more, it's an Islamic nation, obviously, majority Islamic nation with a large radical Muslim sector, certainly in that nation that's caused a lot of havoc over the years. But is Pakistan going to lean into that now, is my question, after what happened with India? It's a possibility. It's a very unpleasant possibility, but right after this conflict with India, the Prime Minister of Pakistan is doing a little junket, a little tour of the Middle East and spending time with the leaders of Iran and Turkey. That ain't good. And strengthening ties and signing deals, et cetera, strengthening defense and military cooperation. Again, is Pakistan now going to lean into its Islamic allies and its Islamic identity in a more pronounced way? And how does that affect its relationship with the West? These are, folks, interesting and in many ways unprecedented times that we're living in right now. But the Prophetic Coalition, the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog, funny name, I know, but you should know it. It talks again about Persia. It's modern day Iran, Gomer, Beth Togarmah. These are ancient names from modern nations like Turkey. And everyone I see is pretty much in agreement that, okay, Turkey and Iran are going to be in that coalition. Russia's the wild card. I tend to think Russia will be in that latter days coalition, which, by the way, doesn't get very far. Spoiler alert, but I'll let you go back and read Ezekiel 38 and 39 and see how the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob intervenes really in a way he hasn't for the whole world to see in 2,000 years. So if you haven't read it, or you have read it, go reread it right now. But will Pakistan be part of that alliance along with the other stands in Central Asia? Could we see that? I'm going to be watching this very closely. Could we see that shape up? Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, does Pakistan get closer to these nations? Look, especially if Israel strikes Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. Talk about the ultimate wild card. Is that something that would unite the Islamic world even more? Look, Sunni, Shia, radical, more moderate, they usually, not the Abraham Accords nations and not the Gulf states, UAE, not Saudi Arabia, but most of the Islamic world can agree that, look, we can agree to disagree on some things, but we can agree we despise Israel. Could that be a galvanizing thing for the likes of Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan to come closer together in their shared hostility to Israel? Because that will be, folks, make no mistake about it, an earth-shattering, literally, event if Israel strikes Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. And now is the time to do it, in my view, because Iran, the regime, has never been more vulnerable than it is right now. As I mentioned, the proxy network, the Ring of Fire, collapsing, its air defenses largely destroyed by Israel back in October, its economy's on the ropes. Look, on the Stakelbeck Tonight Show, my nightly show on TBN, by the way, if you love what you hear in this channel, we also have the Stakelbeck Tonight YouTube channel. You can head over there and subscribe now at Stakelbeck Tonight with clips from my nightly show on TBN, broadcast show every weeknight, Monday through Friday. But we discussed tonight the trucker strikes, these major protests sweeping across Iran. Some 100 cities and towns now affected by these major protests in Iran. This is a big deal. And it's just another blow to the regime. Now its economy's in tatters. Now people are rising up. So it's a time of chaos and vulnerability for the Iranian regime. So if you're going to take out that nuclear program, now is the time to do it. Here's the potential problem. The Trump administration, we're hearing more and more reports. President Trump is determined to strike a deal with Iran. And he sees himself as the deal maker. And look, the guy's a great deal maker, no doubt. And I've read The Art of the Deal. He enjoys it. He loves making deals, and the hardest deals, like the Iran nuclear deal, are what he particularly relishes, that opportunity to do it. But in this case, folks, I mean, Ronald Reagan said about the Soviet Union, trust but verify. When it comes to the Iranian regime, don't trust but verify, and verify again and again and again. So I see no scenario in which Iran will give up enriching uranium and pursuing nuclear weapons. And my concern is, just based on reports, that could the administration, and President Trump deserves all the credit in the world for his first term pulling out of the original incarnation of that disastrous Iran nuclear deal. So why would he then sign on to something similar to that? The very deal which he pulled out of in 2018 and called the worst deal in history. I've had trouble seeing that and seeing that he would do that after his first term, in which he was the most pro-Israel president in American history, and tougher on the Iranian regime than any president in American history since 1979, when that regime came to power. So I'd be shocked if the president signed a terrible Iran nuclear deal and lets Iran off the hook at its time of greatest vulnerability, when now is the time to eliminate that existential threat posed by Iran's nuclear weapons program. I think President Trump, out of anyone, deserves the benefit of the doubt after his first term, and what he's done so far in his first 4 months in office, I think, has been phenomenal for America and setting things right in the world in many respects. But this would be setting things wrong to agree to a weak Iran nuclear deal. So I think at the end of the day, anything can happen. Look, anything can happen. Any leader can make a mistake. No one's infallible, certainly. But I think Israel, at the end of the day, is going to say, sorry, it's great you guys made a deal, but we're not a signatory to that deal, and we're going to do what we need to do. You say America first, that's great. And we're going to put Israel first, the Israeli government would say, and to do that, we have to destroy Iran's nuclear program. So just as any leader, the leader of the United States, President Trump, the leader of the UK, Germany, any nation should put their nation first and their nation's security interest first. So should Israel. Yeah, I'm sure it'll ruffle some feathers and its alliances in the West and with the US, but if Israel feels that this is an imminent existential threat, it's got to act. And I believe it will act, no matter what happens in negotiations between the US and Iran. I think Israel eventually will be compelled to act. Now, does a nuclear deal between the US and Iran kick that can down the road a little further? Maybe Israel waits a little longer? Perhaps. But I think Israel is saying, and Bibi Netanyahu says, this is the reason I'm in office, to deal with Iran. I think he believes that ultimately, that this is the reason God has him in office at this moment in history. And by the way, at the end of the day, Israel's fight is God's fight. So God has his hand on Israel, his hedge of protection around Israel. This is the year of reckoning for Iran's nuclear program. We're going to see how this pans out. I think by the end of 2025, we'll know which way the wind is going to blow. Maybe there's not action this year in 2025, but by the time this year closes out, you'll know, okay, Israel's going to hit them, or miraculously, Iran abandoned its nuclear program, which I find very unlikely. But we're watching it very closely for you folks. Keep it right here. Keep it all in prayer as well. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.